The UES, Prometheus, had been humanity's greatest achievement. The massive ship stretched nearly 2 miles long, packed with the best technology Earth could build. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge, watching the last glimpse of home disappear behind them. 200 of Earth's finest men and women were aboard, heading into the deep unknown of space. "Final systems check complete, Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison from his station. "All green across the board." Elena nodded. 3 months of travel had brought them here, beyond the edge of the solar system where no human had ever gone. The mission was simple on paper, but impossible in reality. Strange energy readings had been detected from deep space, signals that made no sense according to human science. Earth's leaders wanted answers. The alien races that made up the Hegemony Council had been very clear about their opinion. Ambassador Kethvar, a tall blue creature with 4 arms, had visited Earth specifically to warn them. "Young species always think they know better," he had said, his voice like grinding metal. "The void sectors have claimed ships from civilizations far older than yours. Do not go there." But humans never listened to warnings. It was both their greatest strength and their worst weakness. Elena remembered the council meeting on the space station above Mars. 7 different alien species had gathered to discuss humanity's request for deep space exploration rights. The meeting had not gone well. "Your technology is primitive," declared Overlord Zith, a reptilian creature whose scales changed color when he spoke. "You use chemical rockets and metal hulls, children's toys compared to what lurks in the dark." High Counselor Vexa, who looked like a walking tree with crystal leaves, had been more diplomatic. "But some knowledge comes at too high a price. The sectors you wish to explore have taken hundreds of our ships over thousands of years. Even we dare not go there." Elena had stood up at that meeting, her uniform crisp and her voice steady. "With respect, counselors, humanity didn't reach the stars by playing it safe. If there's something out there that's dangerous, don't we need to know what it is?" The aliens had exchanged looks that seemed to say, "Typical humans." They gave permission only because they were curious to see what would happen. Most expected the Prometheus to simply disappear like all the others. Now, 3 years later, that was exactly what had happened. The energy readings that had called them here were stronger than ever. They came from a region of space that looked empty, but felt wrong. Stars seemed dimmer there, and space itself appeared to bend in ways that hurt to look at. "Captain," called out Science Officer Dr. Sarah Chen from her station. "The readings are off the charts. Whatever's out there, it's putting out more energy than our entire sun." Elena walked to the main viewing screen. Space looked normal, black with distant stars, but her instruments told a different story. There was something massive out there, something hidden. "Take us in slowly," she ordered. "Full sensors, all frequencies." The Prometheus moved forward into what the aliens called the void sectors. At first, nothing seemed different. Then the stars began to change. One by one, the familiar constellations disappeared, not because they were moving away, but because they simply stopped being there. The darkness ahead wasn't the normal black of space. It was something deeper, hungrier. "Captain, this is impossible," Dr. Chen reported, her voice shaking. "The readings suggest we're approaching something that shouldn't exist. The energy patterns are completely unknown." "Unknown how?" Elena asked. "They're using physics that we don't understand. The math doesn't work. It's like someone took the rules of reality and threw them away." As they moved deeper, strange things began to happen aboard the ship. Crew members reported seeing things that weren't there. Instruments showed readings that changed when no one was looking at them. The ship's computer began speaking in languages that didn't exist. Then they saw it. Hanging in the void ahead was a structure that defied description. It wasn't a ship or a station. It was something that existed in too many dimensions at once, stretching into spaces that human minds couldn't process. It was beautiful and terrible, ancient beyond measure. "My God," whispered Elena, "what is that thing?" Before anyone could answer, the structure noticed them. Elena felt it like a weight pressing against her thoughts, something vast and alien trying to understand what they were. Then, everything went wrong. The Prometheus began to change. The metal walls started to shift and flow like liquid. The air itself began to glow with strange colors that had no names. Crew members screamed as reality bent around them. Elena felt her mind being pulled apart and put back together. She saw impossible things: the birth of stars, the death of galaxies, the secret thoughts of alien gods. Knowledge poured into her head faster than she could process it. The last thing she remembered before the darkness took her was a voice, ancient and tired, speaking directly into her thoughts. "Finally," it said, "a species that can hold paradox without breaking. You are what we have searched for. But beware, children of Earth. In awakening us, you have also awakened something else. The silence has noticed. They come." On Earth, 3 years passed. Search missions found nothing. The Prometheus had simply vanished without a trace, just like the aliens had predicted. The Hegemony Council offered their condolences. "Another young species learns the hard way," they said among themselves. "Perhaps now humans will listen to their betters." Earth mourned its lost heroes and began to look inward again. Space exploration slowed. The alien races nodded approvingly. It was better this way, better that humans stayed close to home where they belonged. But in the deep dark of the void sectors, something was stirring. Ancient machines that had slept for millions of years began to wake. Technology that worked on impossible principles started to rebuild itself, and at the center of it all, 200 human minds learned to think in ways that no other species could. They learned to hold contradictions without breaking. They learned to believe in impossible things. And most importantly, they learned to fight. Admiral Chen Wei stood in the command center of Luna Base, staring at readings that made no sense. For the past hour, every deep space monitor in the solar system had been screaming warnings about an impossible energy signature approaching from outside the system. "Sir, the computers keep crashing when they try to process the data," reported Lieutenant Torres, his face pale with worry. "Whatever's coming, it's putting out energy levels that our instruments can't measure." Shen had been commander of Earth's Defense Force for 15 years. He had seen alien ships, fought pirates, and dealt with more impossible situations than he cared to count. But nothing had prepared him for this. "Show me the visual feed," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the edge of the solar system. At first, there was nothing but stars and empty space. Then, reality seemed to tear open like cloth, and something impossible pushed through. The ship that emerged looked like the Prometheus, but wrong in every way that mattered. Where once there had been clean metal hull plates, sections of the vessel now seemed to be made of crystallized light that hurt to look at directly. Parts of the ship existed in spaces that shouldn't be there, folding in and out of dimensions that human science insisted were impossible. "Dear God," whispered Chen, "is that really the Prometheus?" "DNA scans confirm it, sir," Torres replied, his voice shaking. "It's definitely our ship. But the energy readings, sir, that thing is putting out more power than our entire sun. And it's using frequencies that don't exist." As they watched, the transformed ship moved through space in ways that broke every law of physics. It didn't accelerate or decelerate. It simply was in one place, then was in another. Space seemed to bend around it, like it was falling through reality, instead of flying through it. On the other side of the galaxy, alarm bells were ringing in the Hegemony Council chambers. High Counselor Vexa stood before a massive display showing energy readings from the Sol system, her crystal leaves changing from green to red in distress. "This cannot be correct," she said to the assembled council members. The readings are identical to architect technology, but the architects have been gone for 50,000 years. Overlord Zythe's scales shifted through worried colors. The humans went to the void sectors. We warned them, but they went anyway. Now they return with this impossibility. Ambassador Kethvar paced the chamber with all four arms moving in agitation. Architect technology has never been successfully used by any species. The mental requirements are beyond what any known intelligence can handle. How could primitive humans achieve what we could not? Perhaps, said a new voice, cold and ancient, that is exactly why they succeeded where we failed. The council turned to see Elder Noxtar speaking for the first time in centuries. The ancient being looked like shadow given form, old beyond measure and wise beyond understanding. Explain, demanded Vexa. Every advanced species in this galaxy thinks in absolutes, Noxtar said slowly. Logic or intuition, order or chaos. We cannot conceive of holding contradictory thoughts simultaneously. But humans are different. They embrace paradox. They believe in impossible things. Perhaps that is what the architects were looking for. Back in the Sol system, the Prometheus was broadcasting on every frequency humans had ever discovered, plus several they had never heard of. The message was simple, but terrifying. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the UES Prometheus. We are requesting immediate clearance to dock at Luna Base. We have acquired new capabilities. We also have urgent information about a threat to all life in the galaxy. Admiral Chen found his voice after several long seconds. Captain Vasquez, we thought you were dead. Where have you been for 3 years? There was a pause before Elena's voice came back, and when it did, it sounded different, older, sadder, but also somehow more than it had been before. Time works differently where we've been, Admiral. We've learned things that no human should know. We've seen the edge of existence itself, and we've discovered why the void sectors are forbidden. The Prometheus approached Luna Base, and as it did, impossible things began to happen. Space around the station started to shimmer like water. Gravity fluctuated in waves. Some of the base personnel reported seeing colors that didn't have names, and hearing sounds that came from inside their own minds. Captain, what happened to your ship? Chen asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Our sensors show that sections of it don't technically exist in normal space. We found them, Admiral, Elena replied. The architects. They've been hiding in the spaces between dimensions, running from something worse than death. They've been waiting 60,000 years for a species that could think like we do. As the Prometheus docked, Chen could see through the station's windows that the ship was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Parts of it seemed to be made of solid starlight. Other sections pulsed with energies that made reality ripple around them. Captain, I'm reading life signs for only 47 crew members, Chen said carefully. You left with 200. The silence that followed was long and painful. The process of learning to use architect technology is difficult, Elena finally said. Not everyone's mind could handle it. We lost good people, Admiral, but the ones who survived were not entirely human anymore. When the docking was complete, Admiral Chen led a security team aboard the Prometheus. What he found inside defied description. The corridors seemed to stretch in directions that didn't exist. Lights glowed without any source. And the surviving crew members, Elena Vasquez stood waiting for them in what used to be the bridge. She looked human, but there was something different about her eyes. They seemed to see too much, as if she was looking at several different realities at the same time. Admiral, she said, her voice echoing strangely in the transformed space. We need to talk. The galaxy is in danger from something called the Silence, and humanity might be the only species crazy enough to fight them. Behind her, Chen could see the other survivors working at stations, that appeared to be made of crystallized mathematics. They moved with purpose, but their eyes held the same strange depth as their captain's. "What exactly happened to you out there?" Chen asked. Elena smiled, but it was a sad expression. "We learned that the universe has rules, Admiral. But we also learned that humans are very good at breaking rules when they need to. The question is, are we ready to break them to save everyone?" As if to emphasize her words, one of the crew members casually reached into what looked like solid air and pulled out a tool that shouldn't exist. Reality bent around them like it was made of clay. Chen realized that everything was about to change. Humanity had gone into the dark and come back as something new, something that scared even ancient alien civilizations. And according to Elena, they were going to need every bit of that power for what was coming. The briefing room at Luna Base had never hosted a meeting like this one. Admiral Chen sat at the head of the table, surrounded by Earth's top scientists, military leaders, and government officials. Across from them sat Captain Elena Vasquez and 3 of her surviving crew members, though "sat" wasn't quite the right word for what they were doing. Elena seemed to exist in the chair while also floating slightly above it. Dr. Sarah Chen, the former science officer, occasionally became translucent, as if she was only partly in this dimension. Lieutenant Commander Morrison looked normal until you noticed that his shadow fell in directions where there was no light source. "Before we begin," Elena said, her voice carrying harmonics that made everyone's ears ring softly, "you need to understand that what we're about to tell you will change how you see reality. Some of you may not be able to handle it." Admiral Chen leaned forward. "Captain, we've been dealing with alien contact for 20 years. We're prepared for strange revelations." Elena's smile was sad and knowing. "No, Admiral, you're not." She gestured, and the air in the center of the room began to shimmer. Slowly, an image formed, not on a screen, but floating in 3-dimensional space like a hologram made of light and thought. "This is what we found in the void sectors," Elena said. "The architects." The image showed a structure that hurt to look at directly. It was massive beyond comprehension, stretching across dimensions that human minds struggled to process. It was beautiful and alien, clearly the work of intelligence so advanced that it might as well have been magic. "The architects are the oldest civilization in the galaxy," Elena continued. "They achieve technology that works on the level of consciousness itself. They can build things out of pure thought, create matter from ideas, and change the laws of physics by simply willing it to be so." Dr. Patricia Wells, Earth's leading physicist, spoke up with a trembling voice. "That's impossible. The conservation of energy alone—" "The conservation of energy is a suggestion to them," Elena interrupted gently. "They exist beyond the rules that govern normal matter. But that advancement came at a cost." The image changed, showing the architects themselves. They were barely recognizable as once living beings, their forms shifting between energy and matter, thought and reality. They looked ancient beyond measure, tired in ways that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "They evolved beyond physical existence millions of years ago," Elena explained. "They became living ideas, pure consciousness, given form. But in doing so, they attracted the attention of something worse." The image darkened, and everyone in the room felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Space itself seemed to recoil from what Elena was showing them. "The silence," she said simply. "They're not beings in any sense we understand. They're the absence of being. They don't destroy things, they make it so those things never existed in the first place." General Martinez, head of Earth's military forces, frowned. "How is that different from destroying them?" Elena looked at him with eyes that held too much knowledge. "When the silence takes something, it doesn't just disappear. It never was. There are no memories, no records, no evidence it ever existed. Entire star systems have been edited out of reality, and the universe simply forgets they were ever there. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Wells whispered, "How do you fight something like that?" "Every other species in the galaxy has the same question," Elena replied. "And that's exactly the problem. They all think logically. They try to understand the silence, to find a scientific solution. But how do you use science to fight something that unmakes the laws of science?" Lieutenant Commander Morrison spoke for the first time, his voice carrying strange echoes. "The architects searched for 50,000 years for a species that could think differently. Every other intelligence in the galaxy follows patterns. Pure logic, pure intuition, pure emotion. They can't hold contradictory thoughts without breaking." Elena nodded. "But humans can. We're the only species crazy enough to believe in impossible things while knowing they're impossible. We can hold paradoxes in our minds without going insane. That's what the architect technology requires." She gestured again, and the image changed to show human crew members interfacing with technology that seemed to be made of crystallized mathematics and liquid starlight. "The architect machines don't just require intelligence," Elena explained. "They require a specific type of intelligence that can think in contradictions. You have to simultaneously believe that something is both true and false, that it exists and doesn't exist, that it's possible and impossible." Admiral Chen rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. "How is that even possible?" Dr. Sarah Chen answered, her voice ethereal and distant. "It's like riding a bicycle, sir. You can't explain how balance works, but you can do it anyway. Humans have always been good at believing contradictory things. We believe in hope when logic says there is none. We fight wars we can't win. We dream of impossible futures, and then make them real." Elena stood up, though she seemed to be standing in several different positions at once. The architects needed someone who could use their technology, not because they understood it, but because they could believe in it without understanding. They needed someone who could look at the impossible and say, "So what?" She waved her hand, and suddenly everyone in the room could see what she saw. For just a moment, they experienced reality through enhanced human consciousness. They saw the galaxy as it truly was, not empty space between stars, but a living web of energy and thought. They saw the silence approaching like a growing void in the cosmic tapestry, eating holes in existence itself. The vision lasted only seconds, but several people in the room collapsed from the strain. When everyone recovered, Elena was looking at them with sympathy. "I'm sorry," she said. "That was just a tiny fraction of what we experience constantly now. The transformation process changes you. We can see the connections between all things, feel the flow of energy between dimensions, and interface directly with technologies that reshape reality." General Martinez struggled to his feet. "How many of the silence are coming? When will they arrive?" Elena's expression grew darker. "They're not coming, General. They're already here. They've been slowly eating the edges of our galaxy for the past 1,000 years. The reason the alien races don't explore certain sectors isn't because they're dangerous. It's because those sectors don't exist anymore. The silence has been erasing them piece by piece." The holographic display showed a map of the galaxy with vast dark regions where nothing existed. "The void sectors aren't empty," Elena continued. "They're wounds in space-time where reality has been edited out. And now that we've activated architect technology, the silence has noticed our galaxy. They're accelerating their approach." Admiral Chen felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders. "How long do we have?" Elena looked at him with eyes that had seen the death of universes. "At their current rate of consumption, they'll reach the core worlds of the Hegemony Council in 6 months. Earth has maybe a year." "But we have architect technology now," Dr. Wells said hopefully. "Surely that gives us an advantage." Elena's smile was sharp and determined. "It does, but not in the way you think. We can't fight the silence with conventional weapons or normal tactics. We have to do something so impossible, so illogical, that even the silence won't see it coming. She looked around the room at the assembled leaders of humanity. We're going to need every human who can handle the mental strain. We're going to need our best dreamers, our most stubborn optimists, our most creative thinkers. Because we're not just fighting for our own survival. Elena gestured one final time, and the hologram showed the entire galaxy, with Earth at its center. We're the only species in the galaxy that can fight paradox with paradox, impossibility with impossibility. Like it or not, we're about to become the guardians of reality itself. The question is, are we crazy enough to win? 6 months had passed since Elena Vasquez returned with her impossible crew, and Earth was no longer recognizable. Factories that had once built cars and computers now produced machines that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Scientists who had studied normal physics now worked with equations that included variables for human stubbornness and the mathematical value of hope. The transformation had affected him differently than the others. Where Elena had gained the ability to see multiple realities, Morrison could move through spaces that technically didn't exist. We've got 47 new ships ready for deployment, he reported. Each one is crewed by humans who've successfully interfaced with architect technology. The success rate is still only about 23%. Elena nodded sadly. They had learned quickly that not every human mind could handle the transformation. Those who tried and failed didn't die. They simply stopped being able to exist in normal reality. They were taken to special facilities where they could live in dimensions more suited to their changed consciousness. "Any word from the Alien Council?" she asked. Morrison's expression darkened. "They're not taking the news well. 3 of the member races have declared humanity a threat and are mobilizing their fleets. 4 others want to form alliances with us. The hegemony is splitting apart." This didn't surprise Elena. The galaxy's political structure had been built on the assumption that the older races were superior to the younger ones. Humanity's sudden advancement threatened everything they believed about themselves. On the planet below, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in what had once been CERN, but was now something that defied naming. The particle accelerator had been transformed into a device that could test the fundamental properties of reality itself. She was working on humanity's most important project, teaching people to think in contradictions. "Remember," she told the group of volunteers strapped into chairs that existed in 7 dimensions, "you're not trying to understand how this works. You're trying to believe it works, even though it doesn't make sense. Think about riding a bicycle, while juggling, while solving calculus, all at the same time." The volunteers were Earth's best and brightest, but also its most creative and stubborn. Artists, musicians, writers, comedians, and philosophers mix with scientists and engineers. They had discovered that the ability to use architect technology wasn't about intelligence, it was about mental flexibility. One of the volunteers, a street artist from Mumbai named Priya, suddenly gasped as her consciousness expanded. The chair she was in began to glow, and the air around her shimmered with possibilities. "I can see it," she whispered. "I can see how the ship thoughts connect to the reality strings. It's like painting with physics." Dr. Chen smiled. Another successful transformation. Priya would join the growing ranks of humans who could pilot ships that existed as living mathematical theorems. But not everyone was celebrating humanity's progress. In the council chambers on Hegemony Prime, the debate had been raging for weeks. "This is exactly what we feared," declared Overlord Zyth, his scales shifting through angry reds and oranges. "The humans have become too powerful too quickly. They're using technology that even we cannot comprehend." High Counselor Vexa's crystal leaves chimed with distress. "Our own scientists have tried to interface with the samples of architect technology they've shared. The results have been unfortunate. The samples had driven several of the galaxy's best minds completely insane. The alien brains, evolved for pure logic or pure intuition, simply couldn't handle the paradoxes required to make the technology work. Ambassador Kethvar stood up, all four arms gesticulating wildly. We should have destroyed them when they first returned. Now, they have ships that our weapons cannot even target, because they exist in spaces we cannot reach. But Elder Noxtar, the ancient shadow being, had a different perspective. Perhaps that is exactly what we need. Our fleets are useless against the silence. Our weapons cannot damage something that unmakes the concept of damage itself. Maybe we need someone who doesn't think like we do. The debate was interrupted by alarms throughout the station. A massive view screen showed the edge of hegemony space, where one of their oldest colonies had been located for 10,000 years. Now, there was nothing there. Not empty space. Nothing. The stars around the area seemed confused, as if they couldn't remember what they used to be orbiting. "The silence has reached us," whispered Vexa. "The Korvax system is gone. 8 billion people, 3 planets, a star. All of it never existed." The silence that followed was broken by a communication from Earth. Elena's face appeared on their screen, her eyes holding depths that made the ancient council members uncomfortable. "Counselors," she said formally, "we're detecting the reality disturbance from here. The silence has begun their final approach. You have perhaps 2 months before they reach the core worlds." Zith's scales cycled through colors of barely contained rage. "Your species caused this. By activating architect technology, you drew them here." Elena's expression didn't change. "Yes, we did. The alternative was letting them continue to slowly eat the galaxy in secret. Now at least we have a chance to fight back." "Fight back?" Kethvar's voice was incredulous. "How do you fight something that erases existence itself?" Elena smiled, and the expression was both terrifying and reassuring. "The same way we've always solved impossible problems. We try something stupid until it works." The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. Outside the station, space itself began to ripple as human ships arrived, vessels that shouldn't exist, crewed by people who had learned to think in impossible ways. Back on Earth, Elena was meeting with her senior staff in a room that existed in the gaps between dimensions. They were planning the impossible, a direct assault on the silence itself. "The architect records show that the silence can be fought," Morrison reported, his form flickering between several different versions of himself. "But not with conventional weapons or tactics. They have to be confused, overwhelmed with contradictions." Dr. Chen nodded. Her consciousness spread across multiple parallel discussions. The architects tried logical approaches and failed. They tried retreating and hiding, which only delayed the inevitable. What they never tried was fighting illogic with illogic. Elena looked at the strategic display floating in the center of the room. It showed the silence approaching like a growing hole in reality, consuming star systems by making them never have existed. "We need to do something so fundamentally stupid that the silence won't be able to process it," she said. "Something that breaks their understanding of how conflict works." Morrison grinned, and his smile existed in several dimensions at once. "I have an idea, but it's so insane that it might actually work. We're going to attack them with stories." Elena raised an eyebrow that existed in only 3 of her current forms. "Explain." "The silence erases things by editing reality," Morrison said. "But what if we tell the universe new stories faster than they can delete them? What if we use architect technology to literally narrate new realities into existence?" Dr. Chen's eyes lit up with possibility. A reality storm. Instead of trying to protect what exists, we create new things so fast that the silence can't keep up. Elena nodded slowly. "It's completely insane. It violates every rule of combat and physics. The aliens will think we've lost our minds." "Perfect," Morrison said. "If we can't understand our own plan, The silence definitely won't. Elena stood up, her form solidifying across all dimensions as she made the decision that would define humanity's future. Contact the fleet. Tell our people to prepare for the most impossible battle in the history of existence. We're going to save the galaxy by telling it better stories than the ones the silence wants to write. Outside, reality rippled as dozens of human ships prepared to do something so crazy that it just might work. The final battle for reality itself began not with weapons firing, but with humanity doing what it did best, refusing to accept that something was impossible. Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, now transformed into something that existed as both a ship and an idea. Around her, the fleet of Earth's impossible vessels hung in space like dreams given form. Ahead of them, the silence approached, a growing wound in existence that hurt to perceive directly. "All ships report ready, Captain," Morrison announced, from his position that existed in several different realities simultaneously. "The alien fleet is maintaining position at a safe distance." Elena looked at the tactical display, where the Hegemony Council's mighty armadas waited far behind the human vessels. The alien ships were magnificent, sleek, powerful, armed with weapons that could crack planets. But against the silence, they were useless. You couldn't shoot something that made the concept of shooting disappear. "Open a channel to the Council fleet," Elena ordered. High Counselor Vexa's face appeared on the screen, her crystal leaves chiming with barely controlled fear. Behind her, Elena could see the other council members watching with expressions of disbelief and terror. "Captain Vasquez," Vexa said formally, "our sensors show the silence has consumed the Hegemony's outer defensive line. 15 systems, gone. Not destroyed, they never existed. Our greatest weapons are useless against them." Elena nodded. "That's because you're thinking like soldiers, Counselor. You're trying to fight them on their terms." "Then what do you propose?" demanded Overlord Zyth, his scales cycling through colors of desperation. Elena smiled, and her expression existed across multiple dimensions of possibility. "We're going to tell the universe a better story than the one the silence is writing." Before the aliens could respond, Elena cut the connection and turned to her crew. They stood at stations that were part machine, part living thought, part pure stubbornness given form. "Dr. Chen, status on the narrative engines." Dr. Chen, her consciousness spread across 17 different quantum states, checked readings that existed in mathematics too complex for normal minds. "All systems ready, Captain. We've got story seeds prepared for deployment. Reality anchors are stable. The paradox generators are running at full contradiction." Elena took a deep breath that existed in several different atmospheres simultaneously. "Remember, people, we're not trying to destroy the silence. We're trying to confuse them so badly that they forget what they're doing." She opened a ship-wide channel to the entire human fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Vasquez. You know what we're facing. The silence erases things by convincing the universe that those things never existed. But we're humans. We've never let the universe tell us what's possible." Throughout the fleet, crew members who had learned to think in contradictions prepared for the most impossible battle ever fought. Today, we fight the way humans have always fought. With stubborn refusal to accept defeat. With crazy ideas that shouldn't work. With stories that are more interesting than reality. Make them proud, people. Make them remember that when the universe needed saving, it was humans who were crazy enough to try. The silence reached them like a wave of non-existence. Reality began to unravel at the edges. Stars forgot they were supposed to shine. Space forgot it was supposed to exist. And then humanity did something unprecedented in galactic history. They started telling jokes. "Attention, cosmic horror," Morrison announced over all frequencies as his ship fired the first volley. But instead of energy bolts or missiles, the weapons shot out pure absurdity. A human, an alien, and a concept of existence walk into a bar. The effect was immediate and shocking. Where the silence expected logic or force, they encountered something they couldn't process. Humor that worked, despite making no sense. Chen's ship fired next, launching what she called a narrative paradox torpedo. When it hit the leading edge of the silence, it exploded into a story about a universe where not existing was illegal, therefore making the silence criminals who had to exist in order to be arrested for not existing. The silence paused, their relentless advance stuttering as they tried to process a logical impossibility that was also somehow true. "All ships, commence Operation Tall Tale," Elena ordered. The human fleet opened fire, with weapons that shouldn't work. They shot stories into space, tales of heroes who won by losing, of laws of physics that worked backwards on Tuesdays, of mathematics where 2 + 2 equaled purple when nobody was looking. Elena's ship fired the most devastating weapon in humanity's arsenal, a concentrated beam of pure human stubbornness that insisted the silence couldn't exist because it would be inconvenient for them to exist. The results were spectacular. The silence, which had been methodically editing reality according to their own grim logic, suddenly found themselves confronted with hundreds of conflicting realities, all being aggressively insisted into existence at the same time. "Target their flanks with the childhood logic cannons," Elena commanded. Morrison's crew fired weapons that used the kind of logic children employed, where wishes could be real if you believed hard enough, where imaginary friends were as valid as real ones, where the rules could be changed simply by saying "let's pretend." The silence tried to delete these new realities, but every time they erased one story, 3 more appeared. Humans were creating impossible narratives faster than the silence could process them. From the safety of the rear positions, the alien fleets watched in amazement and horror as humanity fought cosmic horror with cosmic nonsense. "Are they winning?" whispered Ambassador Kethvar. Elder Noxtar, the ancient shadow being, made a sound that might have been laughter. "They're doing something worse than winning. They're making the silence forget what they were supposed to be doing." Indeed, the silence was becoming confused. They had spent millions of years perfecting the art of making things never have existed. But they had never encountered a species that could insist things existed, even after being proven impossible. Elena's ship dove into the heart of the silence, its hull protected by the story of a little engine that could cross between dimensions because it believed in itself strongly enough. "Deploy the final protocol," she ordered. Dr. Chen activated humanity's ultimate weapon, a reality bomb that exploded into the most human story ever told. It was the tale of an impossible species that had climbed down from trees, built cities, traveled to the stars, and refused to give up even when the universe itself was ending. The story spread through the silence like a virus of possibility. It told of humans who fixed things that couldn't be fixed, who found hope where none should exist, who looked at the impossible and said, "Hold my beer." The silence tried to erase the story, but it was too human to be deleted. It was full of contradictions and paradoxes that their logic couldn't unravel. How do you erase a species that builds rockets by strapping explosives to metal cans and hoping for the best? How do you delete beings that look at the vastness of space and decide their first priority should be to put a flag on the moon? The story spread, fracturing the silence's perfect logic. They began to remember things they had forgotten. The joy of creation, the beauty of existence, the wonder of consciousness itself. And then something unprecedented happened. The silence began to laugh. The sound echoed across dimensions. Not the cruel laughter of cosmic horror, but the surprised laughter of beings rediscovering joy. They had been so focused on the logic of non-existence that they had forgotten why existence was worth having. Elena felt the change wash over the battlefield. The creeping void of nothingness was retreating, not in defeat, but in wonder. The silence were transforming, remembering what they had been before they became consumed with unmaking everything. "All ships, hold your fire," Elena commanded. "I think we just made friends." Across the fleet, human crews watched in amazement as the silence began to rebuild the systems they had erased. But they weren't just restoring what had been. They were creating new possibilities, new stories, new ways for existence to be interesting. In the aftermath, as the galaxy watched impossible ships crewed by transformed humans patrol space that was now more alive than it had ever been, High Counselor Vexa sent a message to Earth. "How?" she simply asked. "How did you defeat something that we couldn't even comprehend?" Elena's reply was broadcast across the galaxy, becoming legend among 1,000 species. "We didn't defeat them, Counselor. We reminded them of the most human truth in the universe. Existing is more fun than not existing, especially if you're doing it right." The war was over, but humanity's role as the galaxy's unofficial guardians of reality was just beginning. They had learned that sometimes the best way to fight the impossible was to be even more impossible in return. And in the depths of space, where the silence had once brought only ending, new stars began to shine. Stars born from stories, powered by hope, and maintained by the uniquely human belief that tomorrow might be better than today if you were stubborn enough to make it so. The Prometheus continued its patrol, no longer just a ship, but a living story about humans who went into the dark and came back bringing light. And throughout the galaxy, whenever someone faced the impossible, they remembered the human solution. Sometimes you just have